Did you know that the Alamo in Texas is not only famous for its historical significance, but also for its ghostly reputation? Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be venturing into the haunted halls of the Alamo, where the ghosts of James Bowie and Davy Crockett and countless others still linger to this very day. You see, in the heart of San Antonio, Texas lies a historic fortress where the echoes of a tragic battle still resonate to this very day. But the Alamo's walls hold more than just memories. They're home to restless spirits who are seeking to make their presence known to the world. Or at least, that's what some claim anyway. The Battle of the Alamo in 1836 saw at least 189 brave Texanian defenders stand against the overwhelming force of General Santa Anna's 1,500 men Mexican army. And the odds were completely stacked against them, but they fought to their last breath. But legend has it that their spirits never left the Alamo. They forever guard the site of their ultimate sacrifice. Almost immediately after the battle, people started reporting strange sightings, noises, and dark figures just sort of wandering around the Alamo. One of these stories is centered around a man named Carlos. Now, Carlos was a Texan defender in the Alamo. Carlos was a brave soldier, but like the rest of the soldiers that fought at the Alamo, he met a tragic end. He was shot and killed by a Mexican soldier right there in the Alamo, but his body was never properly disposed of, and it's said that his spirit still haunts the Alamo to this day. Now, some people say if you visit the Alamo at night that you might actually be able to catch a glimpse of Carlos's ghost. He's said to appear as like a shadowy figure wearing his old military uniform with a big giant bloody wound on his chest where he was shot by the Mexican army. Some even claim to have heard his anguished cries echoing through the halls of the Alamo, but this one particular part really freaks me out. You see, a few years back, a group of tourists were taking a nighttime tour of the Alamo, and they were in this old barracks room when suddenly the temperature just dropped. I mean, it plummeted and it got freezing cold where they could see their own breath. And the air became thick with just an eerie presence, and they just felt creeped out and the hairs on their spine were just standing straight up and down. And one of the tourists, a woman, suddenly screamed and pointed at the corner of the room. There! She saw a ghostly figure of a soldier staring right at them with hollow eyes. The tour guide shined his flashlight in the direction the woman was pointing, but the figure had already vanished by then. But you're not here to learn about a guy named Carlos. You want to hear about James Bowie and Davy Crockett. So as you might know, James Bowie was one of the most famous defenders of the Alamo, and this guy was a real fighter. Even when he was seriously ill with typhoid pneumonia during the battle, he was so sick that he couldn't even get out of bed, but that did not stop him from fighting. Despite being completely outnumbered and in a weakened state, Bowie refused to surrender. He fought bravely from his bed, taking down several of the enemy soldiers before he was eventually overpowered and brutally bayoneted to death. Now here's where it gets really creepy. Some say that Bowie's spirit still lingers in that very room, unable to rest after such a violent death. Visitors of the Alamo have reported feeling an intense, chilling presence when they enter the room where Bowie died. Ever since his death, people have reported hearing the sound of a knife being sharpened and the faint whisper of Bowie's voice as if he was still there, ready to defend the Alamo once more. There's one story that really gives me the chills. A few years ago, a maintenance worker was doing some repairs in the room late at night, and he was all alone, or at least he thought he was alone. As he was working, he suddenly felt a cold breath on the back of his neck, as if someone was standing right behind him. He turned around, but there was nobody there. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadowy figure moving across the room. The figure seemed to be holding a knife, and it was heading straight towards him. And as you can imagine, the maintenance worker completely panicked and ran out of the room screaming for his life, leaving his tools behind. He later claimed that he had seen the ghost of James Bowie himself still guarding the Alamo in his death. So if you decide to visit the Alamo, be sure to pay your respects to James Bowie. But if you happen to find yourself alone in that room at night, Don't be surprised if you feel a sudden chill in the air, or hear the faint sound of a knife being drawn or sharpened. It might just be the ghost of James Bowie still watching over the Alamo. But what do you guys think? Be sure to leave a comment down below if you guys think this is just a bunch of people making some stuff up, or if this really is the ghost of James Bowie himself. And I know every YouTuber says this, but it really is true. If you guys like and comment and subscribe to our channel, it really does tell us the kind of content that you guys are looking for, and you guys will get more content just like that. So be sure to like and subscribe to this video, guys. Alright guys, moving on. So finally we have Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was one of the other famous defenders of the Alamo, but he was also a famous frontiersman and politician. Davy Crockett fought bravely during the battle, and according to some accounts, he was one of the last men standing. The story of Davy Crockett goes that after the battle, when the Mexican soldiers were clearing out the bodies, they came across Davy Crockett's corpse. Recognizing him as a formidable opponent, they decided to make an example of him. They mutilated his body and burned it with the other fallen defenders of the Alamo. But here's where the real story begins. Some say that Davy Crockett's spirit still roams the grounds of the Alamo, unable to find rest due to the desecration of his earthly remains. Visitors have reported seeing a ghostly figure wearing a coonskin cap, just like the one Davy Crockett famously wore while he was alive, wandering the halls of the battlements of the old mission. One particular chilling account comes from a young boy who was visiting the Alamo with his family. As they were touring the grounds, the boy wandered off on his own. When his parents found him, he was standing in a corner walking towards it as if something was pulling him into that very corner. And his parents are screaming and shouting at him, trying to get his attention, but nothing is snapping this boy out of whatever trance that he is in. Finally, they just grab the boy by his shoulders and jerk him away and lead him out of that room. When they asked him later on what the heck was going on, the little boy had explained that he had seen a tall man in the corner of the room wearing a coonskin cap, and the man was beckoning the little boy to follow him. Another story tells of a park ranger who was locking up the Alamo for the night. As he was making his rounds, he heard the sounds of a fiddle playing in the distance. The ranger followed the sound of the music to a secluded courtyard where he saw a man sitting on a bench wearing a coonskin cap and playing a haunting melody on an old fiddle. The man looked up at the park ranger and he immediately recognized the face of Davy Crockett, just as he had seen it in old paintings and illustrations. The ranger was so startled that he dropped his keys and ran out of the Alamo screaming, leaving the gates unlocked. The very next morning when he returned to open up the mission, he found the keys lying exactly where he had dropped them, but the bench where he had seen the ghostly man was gone. So there you have it, guys, a couple of stories about the hauntings of the Alamo. If you're ever there, keep an eye out for the ghost of Davy Crockett. You just might catch a glimpse of him still guarding the old mission, just as he did in life. And if you hear the sounds of a fiddle playing in the distance, well, you might want to run the other way because it could be Crockett's ghost still playing his haunting melody all these years later.